Hello everybody, just a quick update video to tell you how my first game project, Half a Press, is going. In case you don't know, Half a Press is a 2D puzzle platformer with built around the idea of half button presses. Essentially, the player is to navigate through a selection of levels where they only get a certain amount of button presses on the keyboard. The main gimmick being obviously that pressing in the button is half of a button press and releasing it is another. So players are going to have to find some pretty creative ways of getting through these levels whilst sticking within the input limit. There's going to be a bunch of weird mechanics like blocks that move whilst you're holding in buttons, weird puzzle aspects like in this level, which I'll explain. I have been working on a few things, so mainly player movement, which I've been using a tutorial from GD Quest to create. I have commented out all of the double jump functionality because I don't think I'll be using it in this project, but I want it here just in case I want to use it. Essentially, we set a speed, jump strength, and gravity, and use the physics process to collect a bunch of different states, essentially, that we store in variables, and use these states to play our animations and change our velocity based on what our inputs are. Another important script we have made is the doorway script, which I'll try and find in object and doorway. So in this one, we are loading the next scene in our file. Here you can see our scenes are stored in the levels file. We use a pretty rudimentary system for this. We use an onBody entered on this area 2D, sending a signal for this is body in group specifier. This is to make sure that only our player triggers this. If we go to our player's node, we can see in groups that it is tagged player, which means it will only work if this object goes into it. To change scenes, we get the current scene's name by going to the get tree current scene.file path. It gets the file path, it goes resources, scenes, levels, and the name of the scene. We find the level number and increment it by 1 by getting the current scene file to int, which is just going to take all of the ints out of the string and convert it into an int we can use in the editor. We're giving it +1, essentially, just make it go to the next level. So level _1, you'll see that we follow the same naming convention for all of these different levels. Level _1, level _2, level _3. This is essentially going to take that number at the end and increment it by 1. So we go to the next scene in the resources file. For our next level path, really simple. We take the directory for all of our levels, minus the number at the end, and we put it in as a string. We add the string of our next level number, which will obviously 1, 2, or 3 in this case, and we add the .tsn at the end. We navigate to that scene, and that's how our door takes us to the next scene. So if we run the game, you'll see that we have our player movement here. Ignore this stuff in the scene for now, it's just for test purposes. You'll also see that in the console here, it's counting how many times we pressed buttons. So if I press and release the move right button, you'll see I go for half a press and I go for a full press. So I go from 9 to 10, but I have a half in the middle there. Essentially how this level works is this level teaches you how to utilize the half button presses, because most players might walk around a little bit, press a couple buttons just to get a feel for things. But obviously in the corner here, it's going to say you only get 0.5 button presses. And when you start walking, that goes down to 0. If you release the button, you die. So this level sort of forces the player to learn about the mechanic here. And you might have noticed as well that as you transition from one level into the other, you can actually keep moving, which means you can save button presses by moving between levels. This is a slightly more advanced concept, which I may not play around with, because it kind of can soft lock the player out of some situations, but it might be cool for players trying to beat the game in the minimum amount of button presses. Here, there's a bit of a red herring with the 2 steps. Players may be inclined to jump up one and jump up the other, but that's obviously taking way too many button presses when they could just as easily jump up by holding the button and making it. They do have to time it a little better than that. One thing notably as well is that most of the time when players finish jumping, they'll be holding the spacebar here, but a lot of players have the habit to release the spacebar after they've made a jump, which will obviously increment the buttons pressed thing here. So to explain how this puzzle would work is that you'd only get 1 button press, which would include you pressing in the movement button and jumping. But if you release either the movement button or the jump button, you would fail the level because you've used 1.5 button presses or 2 button presses. So this level is teaching you that in order to get to the end of this level, you need to be moving and holding spacebar and keep it that way until you make it to the end. This level is an introduction to a concept that is going to be utilized in the game quite thoroughly to design puzzles. here we have this red herring section of making the player jump and jump over again, fall down and move left. But obviously this would be 1/2 to make it over, and then so it'd be 1 to get over, and then they'd fall. They'd have to release a movement, which is another 1 pressed, and then they'd have to press another movement. So overall, this takes 2 button presses. When this level is actually beatable in 1.5 button presses, maybe even less, just by simply going around here and doing that. So this kind of like forward thinking is going to be used in a lot of the puzzles in the game. I am going to find more creative ways to utilize this mechanic. I think that designing levels for the game in general is going to be quite difficult. But yeah, I just wanted to show you what I've been up to. The character does animate. There's a couple of quirks with the animation system at the moment. Namely, if we jump and aren't moving when we hit the floor, we'll remain jumping. It's kind of funny, but it isn't doing what I want it to do. And as well, if we go into the scene level 3, I can show you another quirk of the animation system, which is not ideal. If we fall off of a ledge and we're not jumping, we won't have the jumping animation. Obviously, we want the player to be in the jumping animation. One last thing, if we're facing left and we jump, we face right when we jump if we're not moving. If we're moving whilst jumping, we do jump left, but if we jump whilst not moving, we look right. It's not a mega big deal, but it's just a quirk of how I'm collecting the inputs for which direction we're facing. If we go to the player script, we can see that I'm doing greater than equals to 0, and then less than equals to 0, and these kind of like counteract each other. There's probably a better way to do it. There's probably a way to get the last known facing direction, but don't know. I'm gonna have to work that out. I'm still very new to coding, but yeah, I just wanted to show you all what I'm doing. Thank you for watching.